Good afternoon, you guys, and welcome to Creating Cultural Relevance. I will be your moderator today. My name is Amber Searles, and I am a full-time employee here at CR Center for Responsive Classroom, and I am a curriculum and instructional designer, and I'm also a consulting teacher for Responsive Classroom. And with that being said, we have four wonderful educators that are very passionate about cultural relevance. And those educators are Dinna Wade. Dinna, if you would just wave your hand at everyone. And she's originally from Mexico, and now she resides in Bloomington, Minneapolis. And for the sake of this webinar, she will be talking, if we have any district leaders that are in our webinar, she will be talking from the leadership and a district point of view. And also we have Cory Wade. He lives in Bloomington, Minneapolis as well. And he will be speaking from the standpoint of for those elementary teachers. And we also have Crystal Cooper here with us, Dr. Crystal Cooper, excuse me. And she's originally from New Jersey, and she now resides in Gwinnett, Georgia. And she is a principal in an elementary setting, and she also does a lot of leadership. And last but not least on our panel, we have Rashid Abdus-Salaam, and he lives in Nashville, Tennessee. And he will be talking from a middle school teacher point of view. If you've noticed, we've tried to cover all areas so that everyone will share their different aspects and perspectives and experiences that they have experienced creating cultural relevance. And during this workshop, all four of these panelists, they are very, very passionate about this particular topic. So you may hear some of them get loud or change their tone. Don't fear. That is just the passion behind what we're trying to tell you and how important cultural relevance is for our Black and Brown students. And also, don't feel uncomfortable about anything, any topic, any question that we will be sharing today, because that's the reason why you're here. You're here to learn, and we absolutely invite that. And as you guys signed up, you submitted a lot of questions and things that you want to get out of this workshop. And for that, we have prepared, I have prepared ahead of time and just found some common questions and concerns that some of you all had. And we had over 280 responses. So we may not get to cover every question, but we hope that you still get something out of this workshop as it relates to cultural relevance. So we're going to jump right into it because we have a lot to discuss and a lot to cover. And the first thing that I want to ask my panelists, what is cultural relevance as it relates to cultural responsiveness, and how can we bridge the two?
Yes, Amber, and welcome everyone to our session. We are so excited to have all of you. It looks like we're just hitting over 700 with many more of you that I know will be coming in. So hopefully, I know this will be also recorded, right, Amber?
Yes, ma'am.
That may not be able to hear everything from the beginning, but we welcome you as you come in, and we're glad to have you. But when I think about cultural relevance, and I'm so glad to be working with this team of panelists who have just great background in this work. When you think about the word cultural relevance that was first coined by Gloria Ladson-Billings and several other theorists, I mean, there's so much that has come out of the definition of it. It has evolved into what we call cultural responsiveness, and the it is the fact that teachers are really going to focus in on their pedagogy and how they teach to relate to their students. And they go a little bit further than just how they connect in the classroom, how they get to know their students, how they look at their curriculum through a cultural lens and try to bring the children into the experiences by making sure that they know them, but they also respond. And yesterday, when we were talking in preparation, Dinna was really talking and connecting too in reference to the action that has to come from that, right? So I have so many points that really delve into it, and it is about knowing yourself, you know, having that cultural identity first as an educator to say, how can I look at my classroom and my students, my BIPOC students, my children of color, and how can I bring them into the fold, no matter what my color is as a teacher, no matter what my gender is as a teacher, to make the learning attainable and that it's valued for those children. So there's so many definitions, right? And I think for me, I really like the responsiveness portion of how it's evolved because it allows you to not just be relevant, but to respond with action. So I would love to, you know, even dig into that more. What were you thinking, Dinna, Cory, or Rashid?
I was thinking the same thing. I think as we're working with our children, we always have to be alert and keen to what's going on in the classroom. And if we make it responsive, we know that the kids will interact and they'll be excited about it because it means something to them. So I think it's very important that we take it from just the relevant to the action part of being responsive, because we know a lot of language and we know a lot of curriculum, but until we can actually put it into play and so that the kids are learning from it and so that they're being challenged and that they're responding to what you're saying and you see that eagerness in them, that's the cultural responsiveness that I'm looking for when we're talking about our children.
I always think when I'm presented for responsive classroom on that day when we talk about the guiding principles and the practices, and I love how, and Rashid, mom, and by the way, that's my mom if you haven't known. So if you see their different names, if I call her mom. Sorry about the banter here, but we talk about it, and I love how responsive classroom changed that guiding principle, what we know about our students individually, culturally, developmentally. I love how they change it to informs our expectations, reactions, and our attitudes about these students. And that's when Crystal and Mom, you were talking about what culturally responsive teaching is and being just it's just part of you. Our biases, the way we look at our students of color, the way that we respond to our students of color, and how we respond to situations or academics, that really rings true to what you guys are saying to me too. And when I make that connection with responsive classroom and culturally responsive teaching, I always go back to that principle of how our attitude individually, culturally, and race and culture are two different things, but they're equally as important. So I just love that part of responsive classroom, bringing that into culturally responsive teaching and being culturally aware.
That makes the adult responsive too. So that part I really love.
Yeah. I definitely want to piggyback on what Cory was saying and Dr. Crystal and also Ms. Dinna as well with the idea of perception. So there's a theory, the Pygmalion theory that responsive classroom talks about in the middle school portion of it, that talks about our perceptions of our students, right? How we perceive our students is how their expectations of themselves, how they view themselves, and how they perform. So we can also use this to bridge the SEL portion of it, as well as the high rigor academics, right? It's not an either or, it could be an and in both, right? So we can see that the outcome, maybe the vehicle is the academic standards that, you know, all schools want to see the outcome, but what's driving it, what's the engine underneath the hood is the SEO that's guiding it. So our perceptions is going to be the one that's guiding the actual academic. So they go hand in hand. There's not a either or, it's an and in the both. It's an and in the both.
However, I believe that if we would take this and be responsive culturally, we wouldn't have to do so much back end work on social emotional learning because our children wouldn't be hurt by the things that we do. So I know it's very important, but it's important on both ends. If we make a welcoming place where our children are excited to learn, then we don't have to do so much work on the social emotional part because they're not hurt when they come in by the things that we have done. Yes, they're very important, and it is the engine that goes under the hood. All right.
And Amber, I just want to add one thing that's so important when I think about Dinna, when you talked about the engine that's under the hood, we think about the fact that we always need that engine, don't we? And we can't turn it on and off. Now, literally, we turn the car on, we turn it off. That's like coming to work and leaving. But we never say, let me do SEL right now. Let me do culturally responsive teaching right now. And I think that's become a comment that I'm hearing more and more. How do I do SEL and how do I do culturally responsive teaching? It is something you become. It's your soul. It's what's inside. It's how you look at students. It's how you build an equity valued mindset every single day. So you don't turn this thing on and off. It's a belief that you have in your identity that when I see you for who you are. And I think what's so powerful about that is, we have a lot of comments about, I don't see color and I don't see children any differently. I treat them all the same. But one of my colleagues, his name is Tony, he said, when you don't see color, you don't see me. And it's the truth. So if we come into that space knowing that we want to get them to the highest level of understanding in their curriculum and achievement, right? Because we all want them to achieve, we say we do. Then we have to still be understanding of the systemic things, the historical perspectives, that even if it's all the way back in 1619, right?
Right.
We have to understand that the effects of that are still prevalent today. And they're still ingrained in the policies and the procedures that are unfortunately still happening in our world. So definitely something that goes along with that.
And from a district's point of view, districts have to make a commitment, an action to do this kind of work. And just like we do with reading and math and everything else, this has to be a part of the importance of making sure that all students that see themselves in our educational systems. And right now, we're not doing a great job at that. I'm just being really honest. So we really need to start looking at the systems that we are in, and how can we change the system to enhance and promote and embrace every one of our children and every one of their families.
And Dinna, you bring up a great topic on the district level. How can the district level, and this can be anyone, how can a district level start this? Start with the cultural responsiveness or the cultural relevance. And also, we have some teachers that want to do it, but my teacher across the hallway doesn't. So how can we get staff buy-in as well? Because so many schools have so many programs that they have coming in. How can teachers see this as not another add-on that the district wants us to do?
Well, I will speak again. I think it starts with your board of directors. When you are electing your board of directors, you have to make sure that they are including every child. Then your superintendents have to understand every child is important, not just the white kids. And that's what we're catering to, and we have been for hundreds of years. And then we get down to the district administrator, where I'm at. And we have to live, breathe it. We can't talk about reading without cultural responsiveness in it. We can't talk about math without cultural responsive in it. Everything that we do, we should be breathing cultural responsiveness, because it doesn't exclude anyone.
But being a teacher, it's hard to hear that, Mom, because we don't have that power to who our board members are or who our superintendent is. So I'm going to tell all the elementary teachers, all the middle school teachers, all the high school teachers out there to just do what's best for all students, but really keeping in mind being culturally aware, disrupting the conversation when you hear it, stopping it, learning how to pivot it, and learning how to say, I'm learning right now with some of my colleagues and my boss, just to say, like, That's not my perspective about things, like changing the narrative for students for themselves. And also, Dr. Crystal, I was going to call you Dr. Crystal Cooper, like we're not homies. Crystal, like Crystal said, this is just, and I say this for the responsive classroom too, this is not what we do. This is how we think. This is hard. And I can't stop thinking about all of my students, especially my BIPOC students of color, my Black and brown students. I can't stop the way I'm thinking, and I'm gonna have to speak up for them just like I would speak up for any of my other students. So it's hard, and I'm gonna have to move forward with my heart no matter what. If my principal, if my superintendent, if my board is not there, run with heart.
It doesn't matter who it is.
Really hard to say at the district level, you have to have this. You don't. You have to have a strong moral compass, and you have to have heart for children, especially our children in this pandemic. And we're not only, and I said this at the last one, we're not only in a global pandemic, we are in a racial pandemic right now.
Absolutely.
We have that heart for students.
For 400 years. And we're okay with it because nobody's standing up and screaming. Well, we are, okay? But we have to start doing something about it. We can't let the superintendents off the hook. We can't let the board of directors off the hook. You have to be honest with them and courageous and put your fear aside for the babies.
Absolutely. Rashid or Dr. Crystal, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I think I love John Maxwell, and something that he says is everything rises and falls on leadership. And I really believe that, yes, I agree with Cory wholeheartedly that regardless of what the leaders say, you have to lead with conviction and do what's best for students. But somebody has to also put the fiscal budget in place for professional learning. Somebody has to say that this is important. We're going to change our policy and make an equity policy and put people in place to lead those SEL and district events and opportunities. And then someone needs to say that while we're setting up classrooms, while we are ordering supplies, while we're setting up our libraries, who is looking at that through a cultural lens? Because what is most important? I read this really great article. It's called The Matter of Whiteness by Richard Dyer. And do you know about that, Dinna? It's an old article, old book, but really, really good book. It's called The Matter of Whiteness by Richard Dyer. And what he says in there that has really hit me is, as an African-American woman, when I walk into a store, you're going to know that I'm Black and that I'm a woman. And something that he said is that, see, what we often do is we racialize non-white situations. So anyone that is not white, the world has seen them as people. They've seen them as, that's the human race, white race moving forward. Anybody who is not, that becomes a race, that person has a race. And I think what is really happening is we have to know our identity and know how our identity sits in the world. Because again, yes, as a principal, I do have privileges. I have a doctorate. I make a certain salary. I do come across privileges. But the color of my skin in relation to someone who else is a white woman, without knowing their credentials, the world sees those things very differently. And so what is so profound for me is I just want people to understand that. I don't want you to be embarrassed about it or feel horrible about it, but just know that it still stands true today. And so when you know that, then you are able to have that empathy, right? We talked about that in Responsive Classroom, to understand that it might be not always a fact, but it could be that these children of color in my class could be faced with racism, bias for different reasons. And I'm going to be very conscious of that and be mindful of it when I'm teaching, because I know what the systems have in place. But when you ignore those things, it makes it very difficult for us to push through. And we got to talk about it. We have to make sure that we know that that has had a major effect on how we do school, how we live in our communities, how we move out of our communities. Color is making a major difference. Just like Cory said, it is a racial pandemic, and it's been that way for years.
And you had to think about too, Crystal, and I really appreciate that you're saying like that top level, top down, and it would be nice. Honestly, I've been in schools for many years, and we have not talked about race or equity. A conversation came up, maybe the fire will go around. It would be nice to have leaders that are willing to have these conversations. And if you do have those conversations, or if you have leaders out there that are willing to take this on, gosh, good for you.
Yeah.
But there are many of us that are not in the situation where we have those leaders having that conversation. I think in my school, in my 16 year of teaching, I could say we've had courageous conversations about race,
Mhm.
and it was at a surface level.
Yeah.
But when people start attacking it, it's like I have to use my convictions, and then when I use my convictions, I'm the angry black man, or
Right.
I'm the, you know what I mean, like.
Or
So,
people start leaving the room. Oh,
yep.
it's too much,
But
right?
one of my professors said, in order to create energy, you need to make waves.
Yes.
And people need to start thinking differently about teaching.
It does.
And
You
I
have to have. Oh,
go
I'm sorry.
ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just
Rashid.
gonna say those we have to have those uncomfortable conversations. We
Mhm.
have to, because I think for so long we got to this point because someone kept kicking the ball down the road, hoping someone else would pick it up. Right.
Yeah.
So the first is the acknowledgement part. And then once you acknowledge it, then you can start to see, brainstorm ideas on how we're going to tackle it. But if we're still on the surface level, we're not even really prepared to have these uncomfortable conversations. That's how we're going to grow. That's how we're going to get better. That's how we're going to put these policies in place from the top down and from the bottom up, so to speak. Either way, it's going to take some courageous people, some courageous conversations, and breaking through that glass ceiling. It's a glass ceiling that needs to be broken through.
Yeah,
And
and
that's
all of us, the brown, the black, the white. I'm not looking for any allies anymore. I want you to be in it with me. I want you to be compliant with. I want you to be in there with me. When I take the bell and throw the water out of the boat, I want you to be right there getting wet with me. And it takes all of us, not just people of color. This is not a people of color issue.
Mm.
that's the conversation I had with some of my students about the civil rights movement. There is a face to it, but how many groups of people benefited from that civil rights movement? It was a civil rights movement. It wasn't a black rights movement. It was a civil rights movement. And we can look across the board and how many different groups benefited from that, where we live at, and redlining and all of these other things. And we can talk about this on and on, but just for the sake of time, but that was something that we all have to acknowledge, that these things do not prosper until people across the board. It's a bipartisan issue. Politics outside of it, but it is an issue where everyone has to chime in on it before it can make some noise, so to speak.
That we're
And I'm
together
glad.
is important. We're in this together.
Yeah,
And it's a good feeling when you're in something together.
absolutely.
And Dinna, thank you for bringing it up. It's not a color thing. It's all of us, because I'm seeing some feedback come in as we're chatting, and I'm also thinking about the questions that we had ahead of time, because there were some questions when we talk about cultural relevance. Why are we alienating white students? And with me being, or why are we not talking about the white students? And with me being a white teacher, what are the best practices for me to use? How do you feel about those questions, and how would you respond to those questions?
Crystal, I know I just spoke over you. I had an opportunity of going to one of Crystal's workshops at the leadership conference. Crystal, remember that?
I was getting ready to go there.
It was just, she just blew me away. She had talked, it was all about this. And I had my lens on of being an African-American male teacher at this workshop. It was one of the responsive classroom leadership conferences. And I was ready to come to this one, just ready to shoot all about race and ethnicity and go off my little high box. And Crystal really did a great job in the beginning. And she said, and we talked about this, Crystal, you said, we need you. And she thanked the white educators. She thanked the educators. We need you, because this work is not going to be done with just me alone. And Crystal, go back and say that again. It was just so
Yeah,
powerful.
and I like have tears in my eyes about it right now because 80% of the teaching population is white females. So how in our lifetime are we going to change that to make any major impact in this work? We need the people that are in the classroom right now to understand this approach because it's just not going to happen. I mean, I have what, 20, 15 years left? I mean, and to change that, I'm hiring people now. Everyone that I've hired, they have been white, great teachers. And I don't, for me, this is me. Again, I'm speaking for Crystal Cooper, that name, right? Um, I struggle with that, like going right, and I know that our children, and bear with me through this, I know our children need to see people that look like Cory, that look like Rashid, that look like Dinna, myself, Amber, right? Our children of color do need to see those children. But until then, see those teachers. But until then, the ones that are in place, we need them to embrace this culture. And I tell you, I'll go into what these teachers would look and sound like. One of my favorite teachers was Miss Cullinane. She was my current events teacher in high school. I went to a Catholic high school, Union Catholic, and I still say her name when people say, who was your favorite teacher? Let me tell you why. That woman looked me in my eyes. She gave me eye contact every day. She reviewed the lesson from the day before. I used to sit in the back of the class and I used to listen to her every single day we met. She had energy. She got up. She called my name. She knew who I was. And she made me feel included. And you know, Cory, how we talk about, and Rashid, belonging, significance, and fun. That lady, she's still on my Facebook page today. She knew me. And why? Because she took the time to get to know me. She found out my interests. She cared about me. I wasn't the very best student. I mean, I got that little doctorate right now, but let me tell you, I was average. Okay. So for me, I think it's so important we talk about relationship. And even as a principal, I ask, new teachers, how do you, what's your classroom management style? And what do you do when a child misbehaves, right? And the first thing that I'm hearing, because I'm collecting the data, they talk about token systems. They talk about, I have a clip system that I pull up and down. Hardly anyone says, in my experience, it's about me knowing my children. I have very rare teachers that talk about BIPOC and knowing them for who they are. And I proactively want to get to know them, to know how they learn and what they like and what kind of books. That's what we want to hear, right?
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I could talk about that all day.
Well, and I think about, and I go on about this too, but I think about when I had my experience when I was first grade, and I just remember that my principal came up to my team and she said, responsive classroom, positive timeout, take a break is not fixing kids. It's not fixing it. And that's when that word fixing,
yes,
it hit me like a brick, like a bag of bricks. And in order to fix anyone, that implies that somebody's broken. And Amber, I know you have that baby at home right now, and I can never look at you in the eye and say your child is broken academically, social emotionally. I can't look. I don't care if the student is free and reduced lunch. I don't care if it's EL student. I don't care what it is. There's no child broken. And that's what I was thinking about when I think about this culturally responsive teaching, being culturally responsive is I'm not trying to fix. I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to understand these families and these kids so I can work with them. Fixing, no, not me.
You're building that relationship. There's a saying, no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care.
Absolutely.
There
I
you
wanted
go.
to, if I could, please go back to Dr. Crystal's point when she said,
Absolutely.
you said something that resonated with me. You said that your teacher knew you.
yeah.
And I'll give you an example of what not to do. I have a fourth grader currently. I have 4 kids, but my fourth grader in the second grade. Okay, my son is Somali American. Okay, his name is Abdul-Rahman. I took him to his second grade teacher. First day of parent teacher conference before school starts. The student in front asks, "What's your child's name?" They tell him. I tell the teacher, what's your son's name? I says, his name is Abdurrahman. She says, oh. From that point on, she called him Abdi for the rest of the year.
Mm.
So the question I have, how would he feel in that classroom, knowing that something as simple as his name, second grade, so you have less than about 18 students. I teach middle and high school. I have about 150 students. I know all of their names, and I made sure to make it a point to know their name before anything else, because how can I learn anything about them if at the root level, it's too difficult for me to, even if I struggle with it. She never asked, can you pronounce that for me? Tell me again. If I forget, could you remind me? She just said, oh, and gave him a name and moved on with it.
That reminds me too of Rashid. I had that experience with one of my students. When I taught third grade, I was at this art school, and we had a beautiful partnership with the Children's Theater Company, and it's a well-known theater held in Minneapolis, and it was all about, and I remember we told a Somali tale. And Mom, I'm pretty sure I talked to you about this too. And it was me and our EL teacher and the Somali tale we told in third grade. This little girl, Amira, looked at me in the eye and said, this is the first time I've ever heard a story about my people in school. Third grade.
Wow.
That means our other students have never heard a story
Never.
about
Never. Never.
So it just took me back, and that's
oh my God.
Once they wanted to put on stage, and my whole class voted for that story, but it was so cool to see students. Like, I wouldn't even know where to find a lot of these stories out there. I mean, I would ask my friends, but people need to see themselves in books.
They need to see themselves in books. Because in those same classrooms, you have the next W.E.B. Du Bois, right? You have the next Amanda Gorman. You have these jewels in your classroom right now that they just need to be seen and heard.
But think
what are we telling them when they don't see themselves? What are we telling them when they don't see themselves? We're telling them that they're not important, and we're teaching them the stuff that we should be unteaching them. So think about how you're affecting not just that student, but all of the other students. When they see you mispronounce that child's name, and they know that that's not that child's name, you're saying to them that child is not important.
Right.
Absolutely.
And when you're saying that, Dinna, please talk about, because we did have that question, they don't see themselves. Had a lot of teachers say in the curriculum that I teach, they're only talking about whites. So how can we promote, or how can we change the narrative, or how can we help these teachers that says the students, they don't see themselves in these textbooks? How can we, let's talk about the lessons in the curriculum. How can we put them so that they can see themselves in this curriculum? And going back to what you said, Cory, if she was in third grade and she's just now seeing this, how can we set up from kindergarten up to high school where they continuously see themselves not only in textbooks, but in their classrooms? How can we prepare our curriculum? How can we revise or make our curriculum culturally responsive or culturally relevant for our students, given the curriculum that we have, math, ELA, social studies, whatever we may have?
So sorry about that. These dogs. The word curriculum. I am not teaching curriculum. I'm not teaching DRA levels. I am not teaching standards. I am not teaching guided reading levels. I am teaching children. Living, breathing human children. I'm not going to be able to teach. I'm not teaching curriculum. Yes, those are the things I need to get to, but I'm not teaching them. So I may need to learn how to put aside what A, B, and C, because these are probably people that are not of color or not of people thinking of the students in my classroom setting. I have to come to them and bring it to life in my classroom. However, I did when I was at Crystal, I'm going to go back to Dr. Crystal. When I went to her that workshop, and Mom, you've said this too before as well, but yes, I can read a book and a story, but that's just still, what was that, Crystal? It was very, very still surface level. It needs to go beyond.
Surface culture. Yeah, surface culture.
Can you
Yeah,
talk?
and I think we have to understand, like I heard a teacher once say, okay, class, we're getting ready to learn about a Black person right now for Black History Month. And it cannot be, I keep saying the on and off, it has to be pervasive throughout the entire school year. Now, there's two things. You can have a multicultural setting where, yes, we have multicultural books by Black authors and things like that. But for example, how do you, when you get to your math lesson, how can you integrate a famous Black inventor into your mini lesson and say, you know what, friends, I'm not sure if you've heard about this, but there's this amazing Black inventor, and you can bring this up in May, you can bring it up in August, right? December. And how can you integrate these names for children to know that there's something beyond this that I can connect to? Because there's so many surveys that come out about student engagement. And one of the things that they say is that children don't always know why they're learning what they're learning. They don't understand the value of it. They don't understand that this is going to be for me to be able to do this and do that. And so it's imperative upon us, and it's inherent that we make sure that we give value to them of what they want to do. And something that I learned, even, as an educator, and I saw in the comments that, even white students need to see leaders, because I'm the first African-American or even person of color here as the principal. And we're very, very diverse, in our building. I have more Hispanic children. I had more white students in the beginning. And I think what's so incredible is children need to see that diversity is important. Do you have international nights? Are you, having opportunity for children to dress up in their different cultures throughout the year? Do you have opportunities throughout the day to bring in music, vocabulary, what Zaretta Hammond talks about with gamify? Do you talk about different things without being stereotypical, right? Because I hear a lot of times we say, I'm going to bring sports and cars into the classroom, to really make sure that my kids connect. You want to be authentic with your connection so that it doesn't feel like it's put on or that it's fake. You want that thing to be very authentic. And how do you find out? You talk to your children and find out their interests. What is it that you like? What kind of books do you like? What kind of interests do you like? And how do you like how I'm teaching? And what experiences have you had in teaching that you didn't like? When do we really pause and say to our kids, how is this going for you one-on-one? Do you like my teaching style? Could I call on you more? Do I make you feel included? We have to pause and get feedback from our kids without just making it one-sided and us just giving feedback to them.
And their families, Crystal.
Yeah.
We need to be having authentic conversations with our families. We talk about this partnership, but it's only a one-way partnership, and that's when we need something.
Yes.
We need to have a partnerships with our families. So, and when we talk about food and celebrating cultures, that's one layer. Don't let that be your only layer. James Banks talks about that. Don't let that be your only layer. Make sure you go up and down that scale with all the different kinds of things. Make sure you integrate it in everything that you do. That's what being cultural about. And let me tell you, you'll get excited like I do when you start talking about cultures, and you'll be animated just like Dinna, because you'll be so excited about your lessons.
And can I add, and I'm going to stop for a moment, but I just want to add this. And another thing is for you to go into other cultures yourself. If you have never gone into other neighborhoods, other churches, that was something that I did with my dissertation, where we actually had experiences where they had to go into other communities, listen to other kinds of music. And it was based on that experiential theory and how, yes, I can read a book, but when I go in and actually sit around and see what church is like in a different space, go to a synagogue, go to a mosque, talk to people of other languages. On my social media, am I going to other pages that may not always be my first interest? I got to get in the room, and that's going to be powerful.
Crystal, you think I'm something here? Come to church with me.
Yeah.
I think that speaks to the idea of, I think someone said it in the chat as well, having that diversity or academic choice where you have them
Yes.
do different things, so you can, like you said, highlight their particular skill set, and you could, there's rubrics for that particular thing that they want to do, but highlight their skill sets, because we know that as educators we come with a multitude of students with a multitude of learning abilities and skills and stuff like that. So how do we hone in on those particular skills that best suits each individual student that way? So
And I think about that, Rashid, and thinking about your question, Amber, about what about the curriculum? How can we embed this? That envisioning language. I
Yes.
think about that all of the time, the envisioning language about how instead of calling my kids love bugs and sweethearts or little homies, why not call them scientists or
Mhm.
so
scholars or thespians? Instead of saying stuff like on the outside of my door, it says Mr. Wade's famous all-stars. Why not say Mr. Wade, I'm the artist in room 219? Because it's not about me. It's about them. I was watching, the envisioning language came up to me when I was watching that movie, Hidden Figures. Like
Yes.
someone told her that she could go to school. She
Yep.
heard it, she felt it. And we need to start doing that with our students. Instead of calling them love bugs, pumpkins, kinders. I can't visualize myself being a kinder my whole life, but maybe I could visualize myself being the first African American astronaut or something like that. So musicians, all those things and also pet names. We talk about that in responsive classroom too. My mom named me to be called by my name.
That's right.
So why would somebody call me buddy or sweetheart? Call me by my name, because that's my culture. That's me.
And
absolutely.
that's good that you mentioned responsive classroom with that. And what do you guys think about? Um, some people have heard criticism about responsive classroom doesn't work for the Black and Brown students. How would you respond to that?
Those people that say responsive classroom doesn't work for Black and Brown students are the same people that say, I don't know how to teach Black and Brown students, or I don't know how this book didn't connect with Black and Brown students, or I can't relate to my Black and Brown students. Responsive classroom works for all students. How does positive teacher language not work for our Black and Brown students? How does not having a relationship work for our Black and Brown students? I think through our whole conversation here, I can relate each principle. My mom talked about families. That's one of our guiding principles right there, partnering with families, knowing them.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Crystal Cooper Thompson, why am I calling you by your full name? But you know what I mean. She's talking about how we need to work together as a community. That's responsive classroom as an adult community. Rashid's talking about knowing social and emotional learning and academic learning. All of that goes in hand, and it's best for all kids. It might not fix the problems, but it'll help you understand the problems, and it might help you understand the heart behind the student. But I'm not, again, learning to teach. And it could be worse. What if you do have a kid that's hard? It could be worse. It could be. So
Mm-hmm.
But you have children coming to school and being greeted by their teacher, right? They're having an opportunity to share, do a fun activity, get connected with their day, and be able to be spoken to with such respect. And I don't know what child, no matter what color they are, don't deserve that,
Mm-hmm.
each and every day. And, I started Responsive Classroom back in 1997 in Paterson, New Jersey, where the movie Lean on Me came from. And learning from the founders. I mean, the founders, I was blessed to have them in our building teaching us, and it didn't even come up. We just knew that this was best practice for kids, and these children were so nurtured and cared for, and we have to really keep that in mind. And I think, just like we started, we have to couple both of those together. SCL, culturally responsive teaching, and building that equity and that relevance with our students is going to really take them far. And I think a word, Cory, that you said, visualizing, is so very important too with this work, because we have to see our children as capable of being Harvard graduates, capable of being entrepreneurs, being the president of the United States. And our language, that envisioning language, we need to say that to them consistently and continuously so that they can see themselves out. Because, we got that poverty too that's in there, right? So we haven't even touched upon class and poverty and all of those barriers that cause our children to also slide. So when we think about right now, right, in this pandemic, those children still need us to continue to build that push for them, because when we come out of this, we got to look around and say, where are we now? Right? We've already had a deficit mindset about the way that we've even set up the systems. Now we have this pandemic and this racial pandemic on top of it. We still are responsible to help these children learn at their very best way. And the culturally responsive and the SCL is the pathway, right, to that learning to get there.
Yeah, responsive classroom says something about that. Like, we believe in putting our faith in the child's ability and we believe in their ability, and how we speak to them and our consequences is going to hold them up and maintain the dignity of both child and the community. So I think about that just being that whole, really knowing that family, that child, and that heart that we're talking about here.
Yeah, that I think that the logical consequences and the responsive classroom emphasizes as opposed to punishment, that's a game changer. That's a game changer, because if students or scholars, if they know, if they're having the time to just like reflect upon what they did, or like a restorative justice type practice or something like this, where they can actually tell you what the issue was and how to self-correct themselves. Because at some point we're going beyond the grades. We're trying to produce or help to, I wouldn't say produce, I would say a different word. I would say something like we're trying to cultivate, rather. We're trying to cultivate these citizens that are going to be the leaders of tomorrow, our society. When we get older, they're going to be the ones making decisions for us. So we got to make sure that we look at them in the sense of, these are going to be the future leaders. And we have to believe that wholeheartedly in our heart before we can speak it into existence.
We want a strong moral compass.
I think a word that we need to start talking about more, and I know it makes people uncomfortable, is racial justice. Because everything that we're talking about, the bottom line goes down to how this country was established, how education was established, who it was established for. And I don't believe that everyone wants that anymore. So I have faith in the educational system and teachers that we can do this. It's going to be hard work, but once we get this down, it's going to be so much fun. And we're going to have students excelling and students having fun coming to school. They can't wait to come to school. And that's the day I'm looking forward to.
Absolutely. And thank you, Dinna, for that note. Right now, this conversation has been great, but we have to come to an end with this conversation. It doesn't mean it's the end of the webinar, so still stick with us. We have some more things coming along in this webinar. We have probably 12 more minutes in this webinar, and I want to thank Dr. Crystal Cooper, Dinna Wade-Ardley, Rashid Abdus-Salaam, and Cory Wade. You guys, we could have sat on here and talked for another hour.
We should invite all of these 770 people out to have.
Yeah, let's go to the after
the pandemic.
Yes, because there is more that can be said and more that can be done right now that we can apply. And what I want each of you all to do in this webinar, and I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint. I would like for each participant, because we want to know what did you all get out of this today's webinar. We talked about a lot of things, and we can talk about more things. Hopefully there will be a to be continued. But for right now, in the chat box, reflect on the following question based on today's webinar. We would love to hear your feedback. What is one action step that you will take to create cultural relevance in your school, classroom setting, or district based off of this conversation. And we're excited to hear your responses. And I'm going to give you all maybe 30 seconds to a minute to put that in there. And as they're doing this, I'm going to put on my timer. If each one of you want to do maybe a 15-second closeout that you want to say while they are filling this out, panelists, please feel free to do so.
I believe in education. I'm a product. The only way I would have made it is I had a teacher, second grade teacher with a bouffant. I don't know, you guys don't know what that is, but it's a big thing to sit on top of your head, who told me that she wasn't going to let me get by with being lazy. Now, in those days, you can't say lazy now, because if you do, you get in trouble, okay? But in that day, I was lazy and I was being defiant. She changed my whole life. Second grade, stayed with me all the way through high school. Second grade teacher. You make a difference in somebody's life. Make sure you make a difference in all of our children's lives.
Thank you, Ms. Dinna. Anyone else with encouraging words?
Sure. I'll go next. I am encouraged. I think, since, you think about the events of the spring last year with, the killings and things of that nature in our society, while we are still in trauma in so many aspects, I do believe that we have moved forward positively in many, many different ways.
Yes.
And we just have to continue. And I often say, and people quote me, it's a very simple quote, but it just says, get into the room. So I do want to make sure we share those books, Amber, that I had in the slideshow.
Thank you.
Some of the books that we can begin to engage in this work. So one of them is Courageous Conversations About Race by Glenn Singleton. Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain. It's a dense book, but it's a very powerful book. I have mine tabbed and highlighted because it's so heavy, but it's still good work to begin to really dive into more of the curriculum side of how you can bridge that in. How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. And you can also see all of these people on YouTube too. So even if you are the type of person that you are not maybe a reader, but of course you are, you're an educator. You can still, put these on Audible. And you can also just like when I'm at work and I'm working on something, I just put on my YouTube just to hear the narrative and to hear the words. And then So You Want to Talk About Race. So we are also going to be working on that in our school with that book. And I saw somebody really quick put Lee and Low, I think that's the right title. They have a plethora, it's our largest multicultural children's book website that we also want to include in our work, because they were on our webinar last week, and we definitely want to let people know about that wonderful resource, because they have tons of resources of how to bridge in multicultural books into your school and your classroom. Loved it. Enjoyed everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. So still stay there. Don't go anywhere, anyone. Miss Allison Henry.
Well, can I give my advice first real quick?
15 seconds. 15 seconds, sure.
Half of our time. She took all of ours. My advice would be, here's my advice. I honestly think the work of Responsive Classroom is life-changing. And I mean, in addition to what Dr. Thompson has said, and my mom has said, and what Rashid might say, because I might take his 15 seconds, I recommend, if you have the chance to go to a one-day workshop, to continue to do these webinars, or the summer's coming, like, it's life-changing, and try to get in there, because it changes your way of thinking. And with you bringing all these resources that we have offered you today, it could change your environment of your classroom and you as a teacher. So come join us.
I have to be fair. Rashid, 15 seconds.
Corey stole it for me. I'm good. That was great. Thank you guys for this wonderful experience, and I hope that we all grow and know that when you're teaching, the last thing I would like to say, when you're teaching the black and brown students, hold them accountable. Hold them accountable. They'll appreciate it. They would appreciate it. They might not like it now, they'll appreciate it in the long run, and then they'll thank you later. But hold them accountable just like anyone else. Don't let them go through the cracks. just hold them to a high standard. That's all I ask. All right.
Thank you, Rashid. So if you guys were listening to Cory about the workshops, now we will have Allison Henry, and she will tell you more about it if you're very excited about it now after this wonderful discussion. She's going to give you even more information about the responsive classroom workshop. Allison, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Amber. And thanks so much. That was amazing. I have a notebook full of notes here that I'm going to bring back to my work with my own family and my husband, who is a middle school educator. So thank you so much for sharing. There were so many really great connections, I think, between what the panel talked about and all of the chat and what we offer for professional development. In our professional development offerings, really what we're looking to do is work with the whole school. And as the panelists mentioned, if you're really looking to disrupt the narrative and look at this work from a systemic perspective, having your whole school attend a PD together is really where you're going to get your biggest bang for your buck, because as Cory noted, we're so grounded in our guiding principles, in our belief system, in reflecting on those during 4 days together uninterrupted, and really looking at how those beliefs drive our practice. It's all embedded in our coursework. And so the way that we work with schools is we have a comprehensive package that includes training for your staff, all the books that they need, and also some leadership support that is embedded into those packages. All right, next slide, Amber. The other piece to note about our whole school PD is that they are the most cost-effective option that we offer. So you can certainly send individual teachers to our summer courses, maybe request to have Cory as your presenter, or you can come to our one-days. And that is fine if you're just looking to start small and grow it with small cohorts or pilot groups. If you're an administrator and you're investing funding and time into PD, the whole school package is the most cost effective. You're going to pay less per teacher, plus we come to you on the dates that are most convenient. You are not kind of driven by our schedule. We will work within whatever PD calendar you have available. All right, next, Amber. And we also, as part of our whole school PD, we offer ongoing support. So part of our post-training support for leaders is we come in and we observe in the school environment, in classrooms and non-classroom spaces, to really look at responsive classroom implementation and growth from a systemic perspective, and how we can support you as a leader or your leadership team in reinforcing an iterative growth process, because as teachers are starting our work, as the panelists noted, this is hard and tedious work that is going to require us to really reflect on our beliefs, refine our practices, fail, get up, and keep trying. And so the ongoing support that we offer is to observe and give you a growth profile, and then hand over that observation tool. So as leaders, you can continue to do this work of observing in your schools and noting where the growth areas are across the school. All right, and last slide. So we do have a whole school services team. We're here as your planning partners. We offer free consultations and planning support. So if you are wondering, how do I even get started? This is how much funding I have. What can I do with that? I need to look a year out, or, I need to do this in 3 months from now. We can really help you customize a plan. And also, if you want to connect with another responsive classroom school who has done this from the ground up, we'd be happy to connect you with your colleagues so that you can hear what their journey has been, and barriers, challenges, how they overcame them, successes. So I put the email address up here for our team. Like I said, we'd be happy to connect with you at any point, no matter where you are in planning for this work at your school. So thank you so much, and I hope everyone has a great evening.
Thank you, guys. Again, thank you, panelists, and thank you, attendees, on the behalf of Center for Responsive Schools.